Hi, welcome to Talking Books and Stuff, the program that talks all about books and writing and stuff. Here's your host, Dennis Rimmer.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Producer. Welcome back. It's another edition of Talking Books and Writing and Stuff, our special podcast. We're rolling right along here, and today we have with us from out west, Caroll Simpson. Caroll has a book, one of many that she has, but this is the most recent one. It's Alone in the Great Unknown, one woman's remarkable adventures in the northwestern wilderness. So, Caroll, again, thank you for taking some time to talk with us today.
Well, it was absolutely my pleasure. I'm excited to do so.
And we'll start with the first introduction type question. How did you come to own and operate a remote fishing lake on, is it Babine Lake in northwestern British Columbia?
It's called Babine Lake, and it's the largest natural lake in British Columbia. And my late husband and I were looking for a place to moor our sailboat. And so we were scanning all the newspapers and looking for something remote. We wanted to be able to put Grandma's china safely into a china cabinet and his Studebaker Speedster in the back 40 and then go sailing away for a while. And so we found a place in the newspaper. I was just like totally excited. And it said Wilderness Lodge for sale, water access only. Uh-huh. And I was thinking, that sounds fantastic. If we could motor sail our boat right up and drop a hook.
Right. But that wasn't the case.
No, Grand Isle that's what I was thinking. Wow, this is a Grand Isle and maybe on the Sunshine Coast. But it turns out to be on the shores of an incredibly beautiful lake called Babine Lake.
And Babine Lake is way up past Smithers, BC?
Yes, and so when I went to get groceries, it would take me 6 hours unless it was bad weather. But if I was at the lodge itself, I could look east, and 450 kilometers away would be Prince Rupert. And then right at my back door would be the Continental Divide. And so it was quite impressive when the salmon came swimming uphill all the way to the lodge and to the Continental Divide uphill. It was just an amazing fact to see the salmon cross in front of where my docks are. So it was kind of exciting.
So when you first saw it, what did you think?
It was the most beautiful place on earth. It's a really big giant lodge place. And well, for me, it was big. It was like 40,000 feet or something. But there are four little cabins alongside that were built in the 1930s.
So you got up there, and the first winter apparently was, what was it? Did you get cabin fever after the first little while of 4 or 5 months in there with nothing to say, and then one day you stormed out, you had nowhere to go?
That's right. Well, the wolves found me, and my sweet David came and found me in a snow machine and brought me back home. But it was bizarre because I never understood really what cabin fever was. And my husband was a man of few words, but you've heard quiet waters run deep. He was a very wonderful and sensitive man, but he just shut up one day. He'd run out of words. And I said, what do you mean you ran out of words? How could a person do that? Anyways, and so crazy as I was, I walked out that house, put on some snowshoes, and found myself far out into the lake. And the only thing I could hear were the wolves howling, asking, what in the world is this old woman doing out there? She looks like lunch.
Lunch. And then he pulls up and says, do you want to ride?
Hey, baby, you want to ride? I mean, how could I say no to that?
Right. So everything's going... I hate to bring up bad things, but everything was going well, and then something bad happened. Can you tell us about that?
I will just say the last time I saw my wonderful husband, he was making a gorgeous rainbow on a slalom ski right in front of me. And then he passed away on the lake. But anyways, and so then that began my time alone for 10 years by myself.
And you're up in this cabin, as it were, by yourself. So then you continued to operate the lodge, right?
I did, yes. I fell in love with the place. I was invested with my entire being into the place. I loved it deeply, and that was the only way that I could actually do what I needed to do to function out there. I mean, I weighed like 140 pounds. Oh my gosh, that's public. But the propane tanks that I had 16 propane tanks that I needed to bring in, and they weighed 180 pounds each. And I had to put them into a boat and then out of a boat and into a truck. So it was very demanding. And the only way that I was physically and mentally capable of doing this was to absolutely fall as deeply in love as anyone could into a place like this. And I did. Yeah, it's still rooted deeply in my heart.
So how long did you carry on running the lodge, which you call Ukpik Lodge? How long did you run it by yourself?
10 years. 10 years. And people would say to me, aren't you afraid to be out there by yourself? And I would have to tell them, I mean, I could be afraid of Sasquatch or UFOs anywhere, right?
Right.
And that is anybody who was going to come and give me grief would not be able to find me because there were no roads and there were no, it was like 20 miles from the closest shore. So bad guys usually don't have the wherewithal to be able to find me. So I felt quite safe out there.
So it started out as a dream. What was the reality after you kind of got used to it?
It was hard work, but the most amazing thing about it was every single day I would find something extraordinary to grab a hold of, something beautiful that I'd never witnessed before. As a matter of fact, the saddest part about me living out there alone was not having somebody there to witness some of the amazing, beautiful things that I got to see. And my dogs didn't care. I would go, did you see that? Did you see that? And my dogs would just look up and say, is it time for dinner yet?
Right. So you had a dog or two as sort of companions?
Yeah, they were small dogs, alarm dogs, and I didn't want a big dog. I didn't need it for defense. I had a Winchester Defender, and I had double-lot shot in there. So if anything, I was in grizzly territory.
Right.
And so I had that rifle with me at times when I was out in the bush. But, and I have to tell you, the closest I ever got to a grizzly bear was 4 inches from his nose to my nose.
Oh, how did that come about?
Well, as I say, I had these alarm dogs, and they would play guard, and nothing would happen. But if there was a grizzly around, they would come to the door, and they would just go and shake and shiver and bang on the door a little bit with their hindquarters until I ran to the door, because I knew it would be a grizzly. And so I'd open the door, and when I looked out, here was this great big giant boar, and he was at least 7 feet long, and he looked even bigger than that. And so I let the dogs in and closed the door and ran to get my Winchester Defender, and it was right behind this easy chair, so I grabbed it, and then I heard this wolf, and I turned to see this grizzly looking in my ventilation window, and we were nose to nose.
You could have called it Nose to Nose with a Grizzly, the book.
Yeah,
but,
we could have.
So,
anyways, but the good news, there's good news and bad news to this story. The good news is the wind from the ventilation window was coming at me, so the bear could not smell me, although he tried. He raised his lips and really kind of snorted trying to smell me, but he couldn't do it. And but the bad news was I could smell him. Oh. And his fur smelled like rancid fish, of course. That's what they like to do, I guess.
Oh.
But his breath smelled like fresh dirt. And I couldn't move. I was frozen. And I was looking at his face, and here are these ants crawling on top of his nose. And he had been digging up all of my raspberries and all of my flowers.
Oh, the little brat, the big brat.
The big monster, the king of the forest.
Did he?
Yeah, and so I was was frozen there until he decided I was boring, and he went down. He went to the first cabin, and he pulled out a great big piling. I mean, he did his own little damage, but he was just doing his job. He was eating termites, and he was eating roots, and and I was in house safe, except the next day I had to take Tylenol because every one of my muscles felt like I was in a car wreck.
Oh, because you all got all tensed up and everything. So, wow.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. So, the summertime, I'll call it, you had guests that would come and go fishing and things like that. But what did you do for the 4 or 5 winter months when you were by yourself?
Well, there was always things to do, and one of the, I'll tell you the fun thing I did was blow bubbles, and when it was minus degrees, and my grandkids had left a bottle of bubbles, and I'd heard all these stories about what it's like in the cold, and my coffee was steaming, and I went out and threw my coffee up, and it just turned into a big cloud of nothingness. It just evaporated like crazy, and so I went in to get the bubbles, and I blew one bubble, and it was just like, it was snow all around, and the bubble was like iridescent peacock colors. It was just fabulous. Probably the biggest, best bubble I ever blew. And then it fell slowly to land onto the surface of the snow, and it cracked open like an egg. And I was just mesmerized. The only bad part about this story is when I tried to get the wand out to blow another bubble, it was frozen solid.
Oh, no.
One bubble.
One bubble, and that's it.
That's it. But it was worth it.
Yeah, well, like you say, unfortunately, there was no one else around to see it. So,
Yeah. And, it was sad because there was one time I could hear through the same ventilation window I was talking about. I could hear the wolves howling through it. And the logs are so big at the lodge. The logs would keep the sound in. So I went out on the front deck, and I was listening to the wolves howl up and down the lake. One pair on one end and one pair on the other side of the lake, and they were calling. And then all of a sudden the wind picked up, and the moon was starting to rise, and the wind built these great big waves right in front of my face, and the tops of them were like iridescent green, and the moon came up just enough to light up the top of the waves, and the salmon came leaping out of the top of this iridescent wave and then dove right into the next one. And I just, oh my God, did you see that? And nobody there.
Nobody there. So, how long did you actually run Ookpik Lodge then?
Well, we ran it for I was there for 25 years, and fortunately, I was able on the 11th year to be able to hook a fabulous man who was a hunting guide. He fit the whole bill. I couldn't have written up a better description of a perfect person that I was looking for, and he just stumbled into the yard, and there he was. And so he helped me run it the last 15 years, which would have been impossible for me without his knowledge and his strength. So it was a great union there.
And the name Ookpik Lodge, how did that come about?
Well, it was already there, and and because we were boat people, we were into this thing where you can't change the name; it's kind of bad luck. So we kept it, and it's an Inuit word for snowy owl.
Right. And because way back in the old days in Canada, here in the 67th centennial year, they were making little Ookpik dolls. They were all over the place.
Right.
So I don't have one anymore, but we've got lots of memories about Ookpik, and Ookpik Lodge is a wonderful name. I love that. So after all of this time, you decided not to be there anymore. What made you change direction in your life then?
Well, it's kind of inevitable, but we all get old. And I was just kidding. My husband and I were both getting too old to deal with the life challenges of living off the grid with water access only. And so it was difficult, but we decided to move to Vancouver Island, where life was a little easier. And to this very day, I flip on a light switch or run the water in the tub, and I feel like I'm the Queen of Sheba.
Right. So
but
what?
The hardest thing I ever did in my life, I swear to you, I've never had such a terrible experience as far as selling the lodge. The only thing that it made it bearable was I was able to hand the keys to an elder of the Tachet band, and that eased the pain somewhat. But I've always been a very upbeat and cup half full kind of person, rosy colored glasses, and I went into the biggest depression of my life. I'd never even experienced it before. And I couldn't write, I couldn't paint, I couldn't make my jewelry, I sat in my studio for 2 years doing nothing until I was started to rearrange it and found this box of my journals. And I started reading them, and 3 weeks later, after I dove into them, I just, every time I read it, I would feel better and better. And it's like today, talking to you about the lodge, I just get this huge, passionate love going on for the place, and it rejuvenates my heart. And thank goodness I've never had to go that deep into depression. I hope I never, ever will again.
Exactly. We hope so, too. It's Alone in the Great Unknown, One Woman's Remarkable Adventures in the Northwestern Wilderness by Caroll Simpson. That's with Caroll. Caroll, what kind of reception have you had so far for the book?
Well, on BC bestsellers list, it was on there for 34 weeks running straight. So that was very exciting. I've been on TV a couple times in the States, because it was also published in the States about 9 months later. And so I was able to have 2 book runs, and got to go all the way up to Terrace and all the way down to Mexico, touring with my book. And so it's been exuberating. I just love talking about it, obviously, you can tell.
So what kind of legacy do you hope the book will have?
Well, I had the Sierra Club contact me and ask me to write down how did I fall in love with this place, because they wanted people to understand and realize how to actually love a forest in order to save it, right?
Right.
And so that's just I tried to tell people about it, but it was a very difficult thing, and I think it takes immersion. Just like it's easier to learn a new language, for me it was love at first sight. But then after I was there by myself, every single thing was just magnificent. The icicles hanging off the pine trees melting and turning into these tiny prisms and through the entire forest. I mean, there were just so many glorious things that made me truly fall in love with the place. So I hope that is a legacy. I hope somebody can go up. Oh, and we were able to, on Babine Lake itself, put up 450 hectares of land for parks. And so I was instrumental in helping to do that. So that is another thing that I'm very grateful for, because my great-grandchildren will be able to go there and witness the beauty that I did.
Exactly. And when you get away from the Greater Vancouver, Greater Victoria area, mostly British Columbia is a vast wilderness. So, and you were smack dab, I guess, in the middle of the vast wilderness.
That's right. Yeah. If I walked one way, I would have to go like 500 kilometers to Fort St. John or something. And the other way, I would have to cross 2 rivers and a lake. And to get to Smithers, it would be 90 kilometers by helicopter, but I'd have to go over top of mountains.
Oh.
So yeah, it was back there, middle of nowhere.
So what are you doing now?
I'm still doing some book tours, and I make jewelry on the side because my hands won't stop working. And I'm playing with my great-grandchildren. I have 5. And as you may have noticed, I've caught one of their colds. So that's the benefits and the crazy things that you get from babies, but they're a wonderful joy to be around.
And that's great. And so we thank you again for being with us today, and continued good luck. And I'm looking at the picture of the Ukpik Lodge and saying, yeah, I wouldn't mind being there for a couple of years as well. So again, thank you. Okay, thank you very much, Caroll, for talking with us. That's Alone in the Great Unknown by Caroll Simpson. Caroll with a Caroll, in case you look it up at your local bookstore. Again, Caroll, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
thank you for visiting with us today. This is Talking Books and Stuff with Dennis Rimmer. Contact him at dennis@talkingbooks.tk. Thank you, and may all the good news be yours. Oh, and don't forget to check out his book, The Great Canadian Notebook, available across Canada and at amazon.ca.